Hey, what's up? So I'm going to create a small video where I go over a small overview on Restful APIs. So I created these slides. I will put them in the description. I'll put a link for them in the description. And API is an acronym for Application Programming Interface. Everyone knows this, but it's generally a way to define how a piece of code talks to another. For example, the jQuery API. All of the functions that they define when you call after the $sign. So for example, if you go open their console and put $sign, then put here anything. The way that we interact with their code, you can call this an API. They wrote a piece of code, and the way that you contact with it is with their API that they created. So all of these functions will call a lot of things internally that they defined, and these are called and this thing called API. So if you one day wrote a package or a library and you want to tell other developers how to use it, you will create an API for them, so they can just interact with that API, and that code will just do anything required to accomplish the job. Okay. So this is basically the idea in API, but a RESTful API, sometimes you need some software or code to do something, and that software and code exists in another server or in a machine on the internet, but you can't see it, you can't physically reach it. So the developers on that machine can provide you with that code. And the way you communicate with it is by sending an HTTP request, and that HTTP request has some information with it. So and usually these APIs, usually not always, connects with a database. So you as the client will send some data. For example, I want to create a user. I will send an HTTP request to that API with the data, with the information about that user, and that API will create the user, put it inside the database, and give me the response. So as this will be called a client-server architecture. So as you can see, we have here this server, and we have these clients. These can be anything. So if you can't send an HTTP request and you send an HTTP request to a server with an API, you will be considered a client. So all of these are clients. These are normal PCs. This is a phone. For example, when you open YouTube and your phone will send an HTTP request to the API, and they will return with some videos with their thumbnails and titles. Maybe this will be a piece of hardware like Raspberry Pi or Arduino. It will, if this hardware can connect with the database and sends an HTTP request for an API requesting data or trying to create a data inside the database, this will be considered a client. And actually, even your API itself, hosted in the server, can connect with other APIs by sending HTTP requests, and this will be called a client in that case. So I know I said API, not RESTful API, but I mean RESTful API. Okay. So the way you communicate with RESTful API is through HTTP requests, and there is many HTTP requests, and each one of them have a specific type. These requests exists, but the way we use them in RESTful APIs is like a convention people usually agree on, but in a real world you can use them whatever you want. But in a RESTful API, this is the way that we use them, just to organize things. So a GET request is to get a data from the RESTful API. A POST request, HTTP POST request, to create, you can say, save data into the database that the API talks to. For example, creating a user, creating a post, creating a movie object inside the database. Patch request is to partially update some data in the database. For example, a user goes to his or her profile and trying to update their username. You will only update the username, and for that user you will send a patch request. A put request is to completely change some data, maybe change the whole user in the database. But I actually never used this put request. I usually use patch. I never used it actually, the put request. And to delete something in the RESTful API, you will send a delete HTTP request to delete, for example, a specific post. When a user delete his post, you will go and send an HTTP request to delete that post in the API, and the API will return. The API will return with a valid response. Now, these are some examples. So imagine a RESTful API hosted in this URL. So HTTP, then myapi.com. When you create a RESTful API, you will create route for each action a client can do. For example, if we have 3 tables in our database, one called movies, one called posts, one called user, you will create a route for like this. So myapi.com/movies, and this route accepts 4 actions: create, get, update, and delete. Create to create a movie, get to get a movie or get all movies, update to update that movie, delete or to delete a specific movie. And these are the routes. These are the routes for this you can say entity in our database through the RESTful API. So to get all movies, you send HTTP request to myapi.com/movies to get all the movies in the database. To get only one movie, get HTTP request to myapi.com/movies. Then to tell the API which movie I want, you will send the ID for that movie. So this request would be get request to myapi.com/movies/1 to get the movie of an ID 1. To create a movie, you will send a post HTTP request to myapi.com/movies with some data. We will see that. We will see some examples in a moment. To update a movie, you will send a patch request to myapi.com/movies/5 to update the movie with an ID of 5, and you will set data as well to update the original data. To delete a movie, you will send a request to /movies, then maybe 9 to delete the movie with an ID 9. So these are usually the routes or the actions you will create for each route. And usually, not always, the route will represent a name of a table in the database. But this is not the case. You can create a route maybe for sending emails, a route for you are free to do whatever you want, but these are usually the default routes that we have, or the routes that you will usually create, but you can do whatever you want. And these what HTTP request, what each HTTP request means in this context. And these are some examples in JavaScript. So here I am getting all the movies from myapi.com, and if you put him maybe /posts, you will get all the posts or all the users, but here I'm getting all the movies. And these 2 lines of code, you really don't need to care about them. This is the only idea. I mean, this is a valid JavaScript code, by the way. I'm not just writing things like this. This will convert the JSON response to JavaScript objects, and this will console log them, like print them. And this JSON means it's a type of data. So usually all other languages understands JSON. So this is the type of data that we will send an HTTP request with RESTful APIs. So even if your client works, maybe your client is in JavaScript or in Python, PHP, it will understand JSON, and it will send JSON to the API, and whatever the language that API is built with, it will understand that JSON. That's the idea. I mean, you can also send XML. Maybe you can just send a form data, encoded data. I mean, but JSON is the preferred one. It's really easy to read as a human. Yeah. And now I'm getting the same. I'm sending an HTTP GET request to the same route, but as you can see, I'm adding a question mark. This I'm sending rate equal to 8, and page 1, and per page is equal to 10. What I'm doing here, I'm sending everything after the question mark is called the query params, and this is a way to filter when you are getting data. So yeah, I'm telling the API that I want all the movies that has rate as 8, and I want you to not give me the whole movies. Maybe there is millions of them. If you return millions, the client maybe will crash and the browser will stop. On a phone, maybe, I mean, it will hang the phone for a couple of seconds. And maybe it won't even work. Maybe it will crash. So don't return the whole data. You will use something called pagination. And pagination means you will split the whole data you have into a couple of pages, and you will allow the client to skip or go to a specific page by sending a query parameter like this. So I'm telling, give me the page number 1, and for each page put 10 movies. I mean, if you if you put here for each page put 100, the API will put 100 movie for each page. If you go to page number 2, now you will skip the first 100 and go to the second 100. This is the idea behind pagination, just to not overwhelm the client. And you usually filter on the movies or the entity you are trying to get by query params. Now I'm getting the movie that has the ID of 1 in this request. So mypi.com movies, then 1, and and this one is for / movies, then / 141. This is the ID for that movie I'm trying to get. And there's another example here. Here I'm trying to create a movie, so I'm sending to / movies. The method is get, and I'm padding a headers. Headers mean headers usually define some information about the request. So I'm telling the API here that the content type in this post request is JSON, and I am sending this JSON data. And JavaScript objects are not JSON. You need to convert them to JSON by using JSON.stringify, and you will send them like this. JSON are just basically a type of maybe a unique format for strings, and languages usually parse them in a specific way to give you maybe syntax highlight in your text editor, and to convert them into objects maybe in JavaScript or Python. But yeah, you send a JSON request like this. I'm creating a post with a title, this, and this is the rate. Here I'm trying to update the movie that has an ID of 14. I'm giving it the new title, so this will only update the title. Everything else that this movie is assigned to will stay the same. The rate will stay the same. Maybe the author will stay the same. Only the title will be changed. And here I'm adding the headers, so that the data I'm sending is JSON. The API will always read this content type, and based on that, it will try to parse this data you sent. If you sent XML, it will try to parse it as an XML. So this is really important to send. And this method actually is patch. I mean, I hope you can see it, but it's patch. And this is for deletion. I want to delete a movie that has an ID 145, and here's the method. You can actually just Google how to send HTTP, maybe GET request or POST or delete request in your language, Ruby, Python, whatever. So this is like the basics. I mean, but there is so many things other than this. You can't learn API development in just one day. It's really, for me, it was really a long process, and I watched like really so much videos, and I read so many articles, and I think these kind of things maybe will make it more easier to understand other videos and other articles, and what you will usually do, and other things you need to maybe to Google about. Something called JSON Web Token, JWT. This is for authentication and authorization. I mean, it's not the only way, but it's one of the ways we use in RESTful APIs. This is just a string, a unique string that tells the API who I am. So each user will have a separate JSON Web Token, and when you send it, the API will know that, okay, this user is maybe Michael, I don't know, and this user is Sarah, this user is Ruwad. So it will know based on your JSON Web Token. And authorization is for not allowing a user to do an action that they are not allowed to do. I mean, they are authenticated. Authorization comes after authentication. So you are now authenticated. You provided a username and password that are valid. I will give you your JSON web token. Now I won't authorize you maybe to create a post for another user. You will only create posts for you. You will only delete a post that you have a privilege to delete. So this is what authorization is. You are authenticated, but you are not authorized to do some things. Another thing is HTTP status codes. So let's go to this website. It's really nice. So it have a cheat sheet for these kind of HTTP requests. So each response the API returns, it will send as well an HTTP request or sorry. Each API will return, when you send it a request, it will return a response. With that response, an HTTP status code. For example, 200 means okay. Usually when you send a GET request, it will return with a 200 status, which means everything is fine. 201, this usually comes when you when you send a post request to create something, and if everything is fine, it will return 201, which means this resource you are trying to create got created and everything is fine. I mean, you should definitely read about this, maybe watch some videos online about them, because you will send them. The front-end developer will read these status codes and try to show the user a specific error message based on this status codes. So you need to understand them. This is the famous one. It's a meme all over the internet. The 404, it means not found. 403 is forbidden, unauthorized. So 403, 404, 400 and 401, these are common. 200 and 201 are common. I think there is some, 500 we usually see this. I mean, the rest are not that common, but these are the common ones. Another thing that I recommend you to do is to check out maybe Node.js and Python. Node.js, there is a library called Express in it. It's really, it will get you started in creating RESTful APIs really fast. So maybe check out videos online about Express or Flask in Python. And what they are doing, that this will be usually a RESTful API. It will accept requests, HTTP requests, and do something and returns a response. So there is so many things are left to discuss and learn. But just like I said, it will take you some time to learn what are RESTful APIs and how to develop them. And I hope this was useful in any way, or at least gave you a small overview about it. And thank you.